Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we're watching America pass from the hands of the greatest generation to the hands of the debt-paying generation with nothing to show for it but the bill. For months, Republicans have challenged President Obama to fix the federal debt, to save entitlement programs that Americans depend on, and to rescue young Americans from being forever known as the debt-paying generation. Earlier this year, for example, I called on the president to show the same kind of leadership that President Johnson did on civil rights, that President Nixon did on China, that President Carter did on the Panama Canal Treaty, that President Reagan did on Social Security. Confront your own party. Say what needs to be said. Do what needs to be done. This hasn't happened. I appreciate very much the efforts of the senator from Washington, Representative Ryan, to try to bring certainty to the budget process. That's why I voted today to allow a vote on the House-passed budget agreement. Seemed to me at least a Republican senator could allow a vote on legislation passed by the House of Representatives with the support of the House Republican leadership and 2/3 of the House Republicans. So I voted yes, and we did allow a vote. However, I'm going to vote against the Ryan Murray budget amendment because it avoids the federal government's single greatest challenge, and that is reducing the growth of runaway entitlement spending. Instead, it spends savings that should be used to strengthen Medicare, to strengthen pensions, to strengthen the air transportation system. It spends those on other programs. I believe in user fees. When you build a highway, you have a gas tax to pay for the highway. You don't raise the gas tax to pay for education. You don't raise the gas tax to pay for a health program. A user fee is related to the service that it provides. And this budget agreement doesn't stand that test. It would have been much better, Mr. President, to pay for this budget agreement at least by a small part of the $1 trillion in entitlement savings that Senator Corker and I have suggested and identified in what we call the Fiscal Sustainability Act, or with meaningful entitlement savings from the president's own budget. The Fiscal Sustainability Act that Corker and I suggested would slow the growth of out-of-control mandatory spending by, among other things, recommending a realistic consumer price index. This is a consumer price index that most economists have said is more realistic in its assessment of what the increase in the standard of living is. The monthly difference of the current consumer price index to the more accurate consumer price index is about $3 per month per beneficiary, which is less than the average cost of a gallon of gasoline. This modest change would help to slow the growth, not cut, help slow the growth of mandatory entitlement spending. And the purpose of that, Mr. President, is to help make those programs solvent so beneficiaries can depend on them. The Medicare trustees have told us that Medicare will not have enough money in it in 8 years to pay the hospital bills. What are seniors going to think of United States senators in 2013 who didn't take the steps to make Medicare solvent? We could do that if we would begin to adopt some of the recommendations in the Corker-Alexander Fiscal Sustainability Act or in the president's own budget. He also recommended a smaller version of the more realistic consumer price index. He recommended several $100 billion other dollars of changes in entitlement programs that Republican senators can agree with. But just go back to the consumer price index. According to the Congressional Budget Office, if we just focus on the changes in savings of spending, it's $162 billion over 10 years. That's twice as much money as we needed for the budget agreement. The rest could have been used to reduce the debt today, and the reduction would be even more in future years. And as I emphasized before, the purpose of reducing the growth of entitlement spending is so the programs are solvent, so a Medicare beneficiary doesn't get to a point in 8 years and say, why doesn't Medicare have enough money to pay for my hospital bills? Or here's another way we could have cut wasteful spending. Eliminate the wind production tax credit. The senator from West Virginia and I have written a letter to the Finance Committee and suggested we do that. Here we are in the budget agreement struggling to find $63 billion over the next 10 years. Where would we find $63 billion? That about equals what would happen if we did not extend the wind production tax credit each year for the next 10 years. So any way you slice it, we could either have taken some of the president's suggested savings in entitlement spending, some of Senator Corker's and my suggested savings. We could have taken half of the savings from the more realistic consumer price index, paid for the budget agreement that way, and then I could have voted for it because we would have moved money from out of control side of the budget over here, the mandatory spending, and moved it over here to relieve the sequester, and we would have done what we should have done. And what I have to ask with all respect is, where was the president in all of this? I mean, if Lyndon Johnson can pass a civil rights bill and Richard Nixon can go to China, if Jimmy Carter can pass the Panama Canal Treaty and Ronald Reagan can work with Tip O'Neill on Social Security, why can't President Obama get involved with his own budget recommendations and help us begin to deal with entitlement spending, which everybody knows is the single biggest problem we have facing our country? Washington could learn a lot about debt and taxes from Tennessee. Tennessee's tax burden ranks third lowest of any state, has the lowest per capita debt. It balances its budget every year. All that didn't happen by accident. I was governor when we needed 3 big road programs, and instead of borrowing the money, we paid for it as we went. We used user fees, the gasoline tax, but we applied it to the roads. And guess where we are today, Mr. President? We have one of the best 4-lane highway systems in America and 0 road debt. While other states have billions of dollars of road debt, we have 0, so all of our gas tax money, lower than the national average, goes to keep one of the best 4-lane highway systems in the country. Those policies have paid off. According to the Department of Labor, Tennessee's 4th best in the country in net new jobs. Mr. President, getting debt under control is the foremost problem we have facing our country. If we don't do that, the people who depend upon Medicare and other important programs will be not able to depend on it to pay their hospital bills. Runaway spending is going to leave our young Americans forever known as the debt-paying generation. We're watching America pass from the hands of the greatest generation to the debt-paying generation with nothing to show for it but the bill. Thank the President.